InnerWhisper channel.
The hidden gift inside pain. Life has a way of touching us in places we never expect. Sometimes it feels gentle, like a breeze passing through on a warm afternoon. And sometimes it feels like a storm that tears apart everything we thought was safe. We all know what it means to feel pain, though the shape of it may be different for each of us. For one person, it is the sting of losing someone they love. For another, it is the burden of anxiety that makes every step feel heavy. For someone else, it is the emptiness of loneliness, or the disappointment of dreams that never came true. Suffering is not a stranger to any of us. It lives in every home, behind every smile, and beneath every heart that beats. And yet, the way most of us deal with suffering is by pushing it away. We numb ourselves with distractions. We chase pleasure to cover the ache, or we convince ourselves that if we just try harder, we can escape the truth of pain. But the ancient teachings remind us of something both surprising and liberating. Suffering is not meant to be run from. It is meant to be understood. It is not a punishment, nor a mistake. It is the doorway into wisdom, the very soil in which peace can grow. Think about the last time you struggled deeply. Perhaps you lost something important, or someone said words that cut deeply into your heart. Did you notice how the first reaction was resistance? A voice inside saying, "This should not be happening. This is unfair." Why me? That resistance is natural, but it is also the very thing that makes suffering heavier than it needs to be. Pain by itself is sharp, but resistance makes it heavier, stretching it out into days, months, or even years of ongoing misery. The Buddha called this truth the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. At first, it sounds pessimistic. Who wants to be told that life is suffering? But when we look more closely, we see it is not a sentence of despair, but a mirror of honesty. It is not saying that life is only suffering. It is saying that suffering is real. It is part of our condition, and the more we deny it, the more power it has over us. To admit suffering is to open the door to peace, because only when we see it clearly, without fear, can we begin to find freedom. You say, suffering comes in many forms. There is the suffering of loss, when we cling to people or things that cannot stay. There is the suffering of change, when the life we knew shifts beneath our feet. There is the suffering of craving, when we chase after pleasures that never satisfy us fully. And there is the suffering of simply being human, with a body that aches, ages, and one day will die. At first glance, this seems like a cruel arrangement, but it is also the very thing that makes life precious. Because knowing that everything is fragile gives us the chance to love more deeply, to live more fully, and to cherish the moments that are here now. Let me share with you a simple story. A woman once came to the Buddha carrying her child, who had died suddenly. She was weeping, desperate, and begged him to bring her child back to life. The Buddha, with compassion, told her, "Go to every home in the village, and bring me a mustard seed from a family that has never experienced death. The woman went from house to house, but in every place, someone had lost a mother, a father, a child, or a friend. She returned with no mustard seed, but with new understanding. She realized that death and loss were not punishments given to her alone, but part of the shared human experience. Her grief softened. She had not been singled out by life. She was simply walking the same road we all walk. That story reveals something powerful. When we see suffering as something uniquely ours, it becomes unbearable. But when we see it as part of the common human journey, our hearts open. Compassion grows. We begin to understand that the tears on our cheeks are not separate from the tears on someone else's face. And in that understanding, suffering begins to transform. There is a paradox here. The more we fight suffering, the stronger it seems. But the more we allow ourselves to look at it directly, without denial, the lighter it becomes. Imagine holding a heavy backpack. At first, you may tighten your shoulders and try to ignore it. But the longer you carry it, the more painful it feels. If instead you pause, take the bag off, open it, and look inside, you might see that some of what you are carrying isn't even yours to hold. Some of it can be put down. Some of it can be shared. Some of it can be faced with acceptance. That is what happens when we face suffering with awareness. It becomes manageable, and sometimes it even becomes a teacher. And what does it teach us? It teaches us humility, reminding us we are not invincible. It teaches us compassion, reminding us that others suffer just as we do. It teaches us presence, reminding us that tomorrow is not promised and today is a gift. It teaches us resilience, showing us that we can endure more than we imagine, and that healing is possible even when the heart has been broken. Now, if you are listening and thinking, but my suffering is different, it is heavier. No one else can understand. I want to pause and honor that. Your pain is real. It matters. And you do not need to compare it or diminish it. But I also want to gently remind you that in every human life, suffering appears in some form. And because of that, you are not as alone as you might feel. Your pain connects you to the human family, to generations past and future, and to the truth that what hurts can also heal. In a strange way, suffering is the thread that ties us all together. You might look at your neighbor and see only their smile, their success, or their confidence. But behind those eyes is a story. And in that story are moments of pain. To be human is to be fragile, and yet that fragility is also the very thing that makes us capable of love. Because if nothing could hurt us, nothing could touch us either. It is our very vulnerability that makes joy possible. So the question is not, how can I escape suffering? The question is, how can I understand it so deeply that it no longer controls me? And how can I walk through it with enough grace that I not only free myself, but also help others feel less alone? That is the art of living with wisdom. As you listen, I invite you not just to think about these words, but to bring your own life into them. Recall the moments you have suffered. Notice how some of those moments have already softened. How what once felt unbearable now feels like part of your growth. Notice how some pain has even given birth to strength or to compassion you never thought you could have. Suffering is not just an obstacle. It is also a path. And when we walk it with open eyes, we discover that peace was never far away. When we begin to look closely at suffering, something unexpected happens. At first, we may think that staring directly at our pain will overwhelm us. We fear that if we let ourselves feel it, it will swallow us whole. But the opposite is true. Avoidance keeps suffering alive. Awareness begins to dissolve it. Just as a shadow loses its power when you turn on a light, suffering softens when you bring it into the open with courage and compassion. Many of us have been taught to run from discomfort. From childhood, we are rewarded for being strong, for putting on a brave face, for hiding our tears. We are told to move on, to stay positive, to get over it, while positivity has its place. When it becomes a way to deny pain, it only pushes it deeper inside us. And what we bury does not disappear. It grows in silence, shaping our thoughts, our habits, and our fears. Imagine carrying a wound on your arm. If you cover it with a bandage and never clean it, it may fester, growing worse with time. But if you gently uncover it, wash it, and allow it to breathe, healing begins. The same is true of emotional and spiritual wounds. We cannot heal what we refuse to face. And that is why the Buddha urged us to see suffering clearly, not to despair over it, but to recognize it as the first step toward liberation. So, how do we begin? We start by naming our suffering. This is grief. This is fear. This is anger. This is longing. By naming it, we stop pretending it is something else. By naming it, we meet it honestly. And when honesty enters, compassion can follow. You might place your hand on your heart and say quietly to yourself, "This is hard. This hurts. And yet, I am here with it." That simple act of acknowledgement is the beginning of peace. The truth is, suffering often grows from the gap between what we want and what reality offers. We want permanence in a world of change. We want certainty in a world of unpredictability. We want control in a world that cannot be controlled. This gap between desire and reality is where suffering blooms. The greater the gap, the greater the pain. But when we soften our grip on how life should be, the gap narrows. Reality and expectation begin to align, and peace slips in through the cracks. Let's consider an example. Imagine losing a job. At first, the suffering may feel unbearable. You may think, "I will never recover. My life is ruined." This should not have happened. The mind resists reality, and the suffering grows. But if you breathe and say instead, "This is painful. This is not what I wanted, but it is here, and I will meet it as it is," suddenly, space opens. From that space, strength can arise. creativity awakens. New possibilities become visible. Acceptance does not mean passivity. It means seeing clearly so that you can respond wisely, rather than being paralyzed by denial. One of the greatest misunderstandings is to think that acknowledging suffering will make us weaker. In truth, it makes us stronger. When we deny pains, it rules us from the shadows. When we face it, we reclaim our powers. Think of a child afraid of the dark. They imagine monsters in every corner. But the moment a light is turned on, the monsters vanish, and the child can breathe again. Awareness is that light. It does not erase difficulty, but it removes the exaggerated fears that make difficulty unbearable. And let us not forget, suffering is not always an enemy. Sometimes it is a messenger. It tells us what matters. It shows us where we are clinging too tightly. It reminds us of our shared humanity. Think of the times in your life when pain changed you for the better. Perhaps loss taught you gratitude. Perhaps heartbreak deepened your compassion. Perhaps failure opened a door to humility and growth. Would you be the same person without those lessons? Probably not. In this way, suffering is not just something to survive. It is something that shapes us, gently or fiercely, into who we are meant to become. But here is the key. We must learn to suffer wisely. To suffer wisely means to let pain soften the heart, not harden it. It means to let pain remind us of love, not erase it. It means to let pain bring us closer to others, not isolate us further. When you suffer wisely, your suffering becomes medicine, not just for yourself, but for those around you. People can feel it when someone has walked through fire and come out with tenderness instead of bitterness. That tenderness is healing. It touches everyone it meets. There is a saying, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. At first, this seems confusing, but what it means is this. Pain is a part of life. The body will ache, people will leave, circumstances will change. But suffering, the mental anguish that arises from resisting pain, can be lessened. We may not control what happens, but we can learn to shape our relationship with it. And in that relationship lies our freedom. Imagine again the heavy backpack of suffering. At first, you may think, I cannot put this down. It is mine to carry forever, but as you open it and examine it, you see that some of the weight is unnecessary. Some of it is made of fear. Some of it is made of unrealistic expectations. Some of it is made of comparisons with others. One by one, you begin to take those stones out of the bag. And suddenly, what felt unbearable becomes lighter. The road is still there, but you can walk it with more ease. This does not mean we will never hurt again. It does not mean life will be smooth. What it means is that we will no longer be crushed by the weight of what we cannot control. We will meet life with openness instead of resistance, with compassion instead of denial. And in doing so, we will discover that peace is not the absence of suffering, but the presence of wisdom within it. So, As you reflect on your own life, ask yourself, what suffering am I resisting right now? What pain am I pushing away, numbing, or pretending does not exist? Can I turn toward it, even gently, and see what it has to teach me? Can I soften, even slightly, into acceptance, so that peace can begin to find its way in? Remember this. You are not broken because you suffer. You are not weak because you hurt. You are simply human. And in your humanity, you are connected to billions of others who also know what it is to grieve, to fear, to long, and to hope. In that connection lies the seed of compassion, and in compassion lies the path to peace. When we reflect on suffering, we often see it as something to escape, something to avoid at all costs. But the truth is, suffering is not just a burden, it is a teacher. It reveals where we are clinging, where we are resisting, and where we are afraid to let go. If we approach it with awareness, suffering points us back to the path of freedom. Think about the times when life felt unbearable loss, heartbreak, disappointment, loneliness. In those very moments, you may have discovered new strength you didn't know you had. You may have learned compassion, patience, or a deeper connection with others who suffer too. The pain opened you, even if you didn't see it right away. This is why Buddhist teachings remind us, the truth of suffering is not meant to make us hopeless. It is meant to make us awake. It is not punishment, it is guidance. Every challenge is an invitation to grow in awareness. Every disappointment reminds us not to put all our hopes in temporary things. Every moment of pain is a chance to return home to ourselves and touch the peace that is always available inside. But how do we do this? By practicing presence, by stopping the habit of running away, by learning to breathe with what is. Imagine you are in pain, physical or emotional. Instead of pushing it away, take one conscious breath. Say to yourself, yes, this is here. And I am here too. That simple act changes everything. You are no longer a victim of suffering, you become its witness. And in witnessing, you begin to transform. Suffering loses its grip when you stop fighting it. Peace is born when you let the storm pass without trying to control it. Freedom arrives when you realize, this pain is not who I am. It is something passing through me. And remember, no storm lasts forever. Even the hardest night eventually gives way to dawn. Your suffering will change. It will move. And if you stay awake, you will be changed to wiser, stronger, more open-hearted. So when life hurts, ask yourself, what is this moment teaching me? What am I being invited to release? How can I grow in compassion here? These questions turn pain into practice, and practice into freedom. As we close this journey together, I want you to carry one truth with you. You are not broken. You are not defined by your suffering. You are a living expression of resilience, strength, and light. Every challenge you face can become a stepping stone to greater freedom. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for opening your heart to these reflections. If this message touched you, if it gave you even a little hope or inspiration, I invite you to join me on this path. Subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who might need it, and let's keep walking together one breath, one moment, one lesson at a time. Because freedom is possible, peace is possible, and it begins right here, in this very moment, with you.